You see the starter motor laid in place on top of the transmission. You've done the trial installation, so you know this routine. With everything prepared, your fasteners laid out, the right side starter casting itself emptied of everything, except you should have never removed this pinion gear. But we have loosely installed the levers under the fork. On the back side, I like to fasten or attach the gasket to the casting with some adhesive. So when I remove this, if I have to remove it, the gasket comes with the right side starter and isn't damaged. So what I'm going to do next is to actually fasten, again, as we did in the trial installation, the right side starter to the transmission face. Remember to recenter the ring and check for gear backlash. And the 3 fasteners supplied with the kit to replace the studs, I will now use a little bit of blue, always only blue Loctite, and make sure everything is clean and prepped so that the Loctite works correctly. 9 fasteners in total. Here's the fine thread nuts. You may be using socket head caps or bolts on a custom application, but on a stock application we removed the 3 studs, so we have 6 fine threaded nuts, flat washers and lock washers. We don't want to put lock washers against the aluminum face. We always want to put them against a flat washer. So I will firmly attach and permanently attach the right side starter to the face of the transmission. Then I will install the starter motor as we test fit it. There's no gasket here, there's none needed. There's no oil inside the cavity of the right side starter. We'll attach the starter motor to the back side of the right side starter. And during this final installation, we will use a drop of blue Loctite. And the first thing I want to point out is the WD-40 can you saw in the last scene for cleaning threads. That was not WD-40, that was WD-40 brand contact cleaner that I am using in advance of the Loctite. We have here now the next set of parts that we're going to install in the right side starter. And you'll see the Anasys fortified grease that I used, but your parts were already greased when they arrived in the box. However, if you're doing a repair job, all of these moving parts must be lubricated. So the next thing we're going to do is install that big gear on that dowel pin. The back side of the gear, the dowel pin, and the bore will all be lubricated. Then the clutch cable can come down in front. If you look closely, you'll see the clutch cable is already attached to the housing, but the barrel has been pushed back up inside to make clearance for the gear. That's the sequence of the installation here. After all the bolts in the face and the starter are tight, then the gear can be installed and it will cover some of those. Then the clutch cable itself can come in front of that. Then we will put the cable connector on and assemble the ball and ramp, all well lubricated. Then before we put it in the bore, we will lubricate the push rod, the throwout bearing as well if you're doing a repair job, but the new throwout bearings arrive lubricated. We have to back off the adjustment nut and the pressure plate from the other side, put the lubricated throwout bearing assembly and push rod in place. Then carefully with the ball and ramp hooked to the clutch cable, we have to hold it all together and pivot it into place. Then clean up the flange, and I will seal the flange with some black silicone. There is no gasket. The adjustment then is performed as you will see in the clutch section. Let's discuss how your clutch The left side clutch, your typically 10-spring clutch, works with the right side electric start. Since we have an electric motor on top of the transmission, we don't have any room for the mechanical linkage. So what we have done here is used a ball and ramp system with a cable. So we have a cable operated clutch. It'll work with the rocker clutch, it works with your handlebar clutch. But we're going to disregard that and talk just about how the clutch release itself works, since we don't have the mechanical linkage. The cable is a soft tail type at the transmission end, and it's going to hook to a 1990s style ball and ramp. Again, all mechanical linkage, including your mousetrap, is eliminated. Most mousetrap owners will wire it shut and leave it in place. The hand clutch cable attaches to the clutch perch directly, and you may use a stock soft tail style cable that they all have a loop on the top rather than a barrel, and they use the nylon pin. The late model clutch perch captures the pin. In the early style, you can convert and use this. You'll have to drill and put a washer to capture the pin so it doesn't fall out of the handle. This short cable is for the rocker clutch. This is your rocker clutch conversion. Those instructions are all included when you buy the kit. What we want to discuss is that you need to have a late model clutch. That is a 68 and later 5-plate clutch. You're only going to get 75 thousandths of separation from this ball and ramp. That's less than you had from the old foot clutch. If you had a hand clutch, you're going to typically have about the same separation. But the old 3.5 plate foot clutch required a little more separation. That was provided by the rocker clutch mechanical linkage. So we're going to have to update the clutch a little bit. These are two of the best, simplest things you can do for 20 bucks a piece. The little disc keeps your drum from following the plates when you release the clutch, and very seldom do I find a flat pressure plate. Regardless, I'm not going to teach you how to set up a 4-speed clutch. You're a mechanic, you should already know how to do that. If this push rod is moving 75 thousandths of an inch laterally, which you can measure, then the right side starter clutch operation is working perfectly. If you have less movement than that, here's what the problem could be. First of all, a ball and ramp, the ball and ramp, which is captured in the right side starter in this cavity, has to be in the neutral position to start. Disregard the cable that pulls on here completely when you've set up the clutch. And in the neutral position, so the balls are in the bottom of the ramps, that's where we want to start pulling from. If we're halfway up the hill and we start pulling, we're of course not going to get the same amount of separation. So in the neutral position is where the push rod, which by the way uses the heavy duty bearing, and this backside has been counterbored larger to accept this heavy bearing. And this setup, of course, is going to be down the center of the main shaft of the motorcycle. If we start from the neutral position, we have 5/8 of an inch of pull, regardless if it's a foot cable or the hand cable. That's all that's provided by the hand cable. And in that 5/8 of an inch, you'll get about 75 thousandths of separation or push rod movement, minus the slack. Now this is the problem. Most people set this up with too much slack from the other side, from the adjustment screw in your clutch plate. When you adjust this, you need to go up snug or zero clearance and back it off only 1 wrench flat. If we do the math with a 3/8 24 pitch, that's about 7 thousandths. That's plenty to take the pressure off. If we go any more than that, you're going to lose too much of your stroke before you start pushing the clutch plates. So we have to start from neutral. The tail, I call this the tail of this ball and ramp assembly, will be down here, nearly touching this surface. So if it's anywhere else, they've probably got the cable that's pulling misadjusted. The clutch was dragging, so they just tightened the cable up. That didn't help any. So again, relax the cable that pulls it. Get it in a neutral position. Tighten it up snug. Back it off one wrench flat. Come over and check it. Make sure that you can just wiggle the tail. You'll feel that there's a little bit of clearance there. At that point, and of course this is captured behind this plate, you'll be working in here. If you have to remove this, or it can be a little bit awkward, there's no gasket on the plate. It's silicone sealed. Again, all these are in the instructions. This should be, you might be the guy fixing it. That should all be put together. So make sure it's adjusted tight and it just wiggles here. Then adjust the cable. You'll understand how it works when you look at it, how this foot clutch, all the holes here are because the flats weren't timed on the rocker pedal, and we have to pick the right hole to weld the pin in to pull the cable. But again, that will all be done. Get this set up correctly, then you can set up your toe-to-go pedal, and everything will be fine. The same with your hand clutch. Once you get this set up correctly, adjust your hand clutch so that you have your typical little bit of slack at the top where you can pull the cable a little bit at the perch. It's that simple, but it seems to be a common complaint with the right side starter is I'll get a call and they'll say my clutch is dragging. Again, typically they just don't have this adjustment tight enough.